I call the member for McEwen.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Well, good government takes good vision. Good government takes guts, and good government demands compassion. Labor governments are the ones that deliver these things. We provide vision, we legislate reform, and we are compassionate. The same, quite clearly, cannot be said of this government. Ever since Tony Abbott took control of this coalition, it no longer knows what it stands for. It defines itself by what it opposes, not what it supports. It is a government bereft of ideas and an agenda, with the only abiding sentiment being the one that is steeled in opposition, fear-driven populism. This might sometimes be an election-winning strategy, but it does not make for good government. It does not provide a plan for how this country is going to go navigate the turbulent waters ahead. With no plan but an undying thirst for power, the Morrison government has resorted to what's now termed as legislation. Legislation brought into the parliament with the specific purpose of it being a test for Labor. The kind of government that uses acts of parliament as a test for the opposition is the kind of government that displays its lack of values and it has its priorities completely wrong. Whose side are you on is the standard hyper-partisan cry from the PM and the flying monkeys. They've reduced policy debate to a schoolyard stoush, either your shirts or your skins. The one-trick pony PM relies on divisive politics and jeering at Labor to deflect scrutiny whenever questions are raised about the shonky dealings of the government. That's because Prime Minister Morrison's thoughts are binary. He wants you to believe that everything is either black or white. No one will ever accuse him of sophistication, complexity or depth in a thought process. So we ask, whose turn is it this week? Which group of marginalised Australians has the PM got his sights set on? Disabled people, the elderly, Australian workers. Well, look, it's been a very, very busy week with the serious questions of impropriety by members of the government. So let's go after the easy target, the unemployed. It is astoundingly but sadly not at all unexpected that a political party would seek government and rush to pass legislation which will demonise elderly Australians by demanding they give urine samples before receiving unemployment payments. Taxpayers expect the government to ensure their money is being spent responsibly and that welfare recipients are using it to put food on the table, send their kids to school and pay their bills rather than on drugs, cries Senator Ruston. The Australian National Council on Drugs has previously found there was no evidence that drug testing welfare beneficiaries would have any positive effect on those individuals or society as a whole. This antagonistic plan by the Morrison government to drug test welfare recipients is purely designed to attack poor people, not fight poverty, not to help people, just demonise them. Yet even when they focus on this small issue, they don't even get it close to right. Instead of treating drug abuse with the complexity and understanding it deserves, through a lens of healthcare, they instead focus on the punitive measures which demonise vulnerable Australians. This is not unfunded empathy. It betrays Australia's long tradition of egalitarianism and attacks the very heart of the social contract that underpins this nation's success. The question is, why doesn't the government attack poverty instead of attacking poor people? It is equally incredible that a political party should sit on those benches and shower doubt on the irrefutable fact that climate change is influenced by the actions of humans. A signal to farmers across the country that the government is not on their side when it comes to dealing with the catastrophic effects of global warming. You might think that even the coalition can't deal with climate change. Maybe they could focus on the effects of our changing environment. Yet after 6 years in power, the Nationals have not begun a dam building spree. There's been no push for environmental regulations that might help prevent the more frequent and increasing intense natural disasters. The one constant with drought and changing climate is that the Nationals are all talk and no action when it comes to assisting farmers or the environment they are in. It also seems that the government is determined to stick to the status quo and evidence be damned when it comes to their failed robo-debt. There is no clearer example of this than a scheme that hounds people, including my constituents, to recoup money which is in a huge number of cases was never ever owed in the first place. This was the case in my electorate where a woman who worked for 15 years was a victim of this predatory scheme. After falling ill, my constituent was forced to take leave and benefited from the Centrelink sick allowance. When she received a message from the robo-debt system saying that she owed $1,200, she knew something was wrong. While my team were able to help her, thousands of others don't know their options or are too scared to challenge a government department. The Minister has stated there was approximately 160,000 people who've experienced financial stress and accusations of wrongdoing, all over money they never owed in the first place. This is another example of a government that treats decent Australians with contempt. The Liberal Party likes to proclaim they are fantastic economic managers. Whenever the coalition is in power, the adults are in charge of the economy, they cry. Well, right now, and not for the first time, it seems that the adults have been asleep at the wheel. GDP growth is at its lowest since the GFC. Wages have been stagnant for years. The Reserve Bank Governor has bemoaned the lack of investment in Australia's infrastructure, and the coalition simply pretend it's not happening. There is not one forward-thinking economic policy that has come from the government benches since they came to power. This is because the modern-day Liberal Party is no longer believes in sound economic management. It is no longer the party of Menzies and Fraser. It is a shell of its former self whose only goal is to cling to power at all costs. They often criticise Labor for talking down the economy, but let me be clear, we're not talking it down, we're actually highlighting and putting a spotlight on the coalition's history of economic management, because there has been none. It's all talk, no action. Remember in March 2013 when Sloppy Joe Hockey and Abbott promised a surplus in their first year of government and one in each and every year after that? What did they deliver? None. They doubled the debt, doubled the deficit, cut education, cut science, cut health, cut taxes for banks. That was their huge idea, tax cuts for banks. Debt and deficit and deflection, the hallmark of this morally bankrupt and ethically challenged government. These are examples of a trend that has been occurring over the last 6 years. Increasingly, the government has sidelined the interests of working and middle-class Australians in favour of big business. The Prime Minister has determined the best path forward is us versus them, one that has no space for nuance, expert opinions or compassion. Coalition's government's legislative agenda is determined by policies that play to fears and insecurities, but work against the average Australian, alienate and stroke an uneasy cauldron in immigration history. Nearly 2 decades ago, Shane Stone told John Howard the Australian people see their party as mean and tricky. Well, it seems that the years have passed and this has become ever more entrenched. A government entrenched in controversy every day. Palladium, Hello World, Crown, the list goes on. It is no wonder they voted against and shut down debate on having a National Integrity Commission. The Prime Minister likes to pose the question, whose side are you on? Well, Prime Minister, we're on the side of ordinary Australians, the one who work hard and try to build a better life for themselves, the parents who struggle each day just to put food on their table and pay the bills, the young families who want to give their kids the best opportunities, the elderlies who have built this nation and just want a decent quality of life, not to be forced to work until they're 70. The workers who put in a full day's work and expect a living wage and their entitlements paid. We're on the side of the disabled and their families who just want to get the support they need when they need it. I'm on the side of an inclusive Australia, one that builds up and doesn't tear down the millions of Australians who aren't in high-paying jobs. They're having a go, but they're not getting a go under this government. These are the people whose side we are on.